Before you start cutting, there is an important step, and that is to do just a little bit of shading. So as things go back further away, they get a little bit darker. So what we want is a dark shade around our rectangle, and it gets lighter and lighter as it gets closer to us. So I'm going to start with the floor, and I'm using a black colored pencil. If you use crayon, you'd use a black crayon. And so right next to this back wall here, I'm going to go pretty dark all the way across. Now here's the trick, is that you want to get lighter and lighter. Let's get closer here. You want to get lighter and lighter as you go down the floor. So I can still mostly see my tiles through the shading, but right next to this back wall it's almost black. And then it gets very light as we get out to here. So we're not going too far down, it's just this way back space. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this wall. So I just turn my paper, but I'm going to do the same thing. It's dark right next to it. And you want to really have that sort of medium tone in there too. For example, with the ceiling here, I don't want to go black, like super dark and then light, right? It's just, that just doesn't have that shading effect. You got to kind of gradually get darker. And I can color right over my patterns because this is a shadow that's on the wall. And then I just need to do my last wall here. If you want, you can go right over this empty space here because we're going to eventually cut that out. But this is why we're shading now, because we haven't cut anything yet. It's a lot easier. So now we really have that three-dimensional feel. We've got these shadows. With this white space and our blank spaces, that's probably throwing us off a little bit. But when I start putting it all together, that shading just makes a huge difference in having the three-dimensional feel. So now what I want to do is cut out the windows. So, and the backspace here. So what you want to do is just kind of carefully in the middle of the space, I'm almost making a little wrinkle here, and I'm going to cut a slit. If you need help with that, let me know. And then I'm going to stick my scissors in there, and I'm really working in the center so that any of this breaking stuff doesn't go too close to my edge. And then once I start cutting, now I really have control. And then make sure when I hit the edge here, I'm on the line. And there's that. Now for my windows, again, just make a cut. I'm going to cut this way until I get to the line, and then stay on it best I can. Oop. Now, depending on how close you got, these papers might be super, super skinny, thin, and fragile. If they rip, then don't tape it or glue it or anything. We can fix it when we attach this to another piece of paper. So again, if you accidentally rip, let's say this little piece in half, or if this whole piece comes off, save it separately and we'll attach it all together when we glue the background paper. So now we're ready to start putting everything together. So what you'll want to do next is decide what you want your background color to be. One option is black, and the nice thing about a black background is that it really makes it look like the space back here recedes way back into space. It gives you that illusion of space because black naturally looks like it's farther away. However, the problem with black paper is you can only do so much as far as drawing designs in these spaces, which you will want to do. So another option is if you're looking for more of like a daytime look, you could use the light blue paper, and then you could really draw and color some things in this space here to go with your picture. I am going to stick with the black paper though. So when you glue, this is really important, you only want to put glue on the ceiling and the floor. If one of these side strips is broken, you can glue that too. But for mine, I'm going to do a few dots on the ceiling, a few dots on the floor. I'll flip it over, and the reason is, number one, we don't have drops of glue flying everywhere. Also, when you cut out your images, you're going to want to be able to slip them behind the walls here. So for now, I'm just gluing behind the floor and the ceiling. In fact, even if your little sides are broken here, you might just want to wait on gluing those. And then your next step is to cut out your images. Now, cutting them neatly is super important for this, because if you don't, especially if you include some of the background of your photos, it's not going to look like it's actually part of your picture. So we want it to all work together. So for example, for this cat, I might just cut off these little hairs that are sticking up on the top, because there's really just no way I can cut those out without some of this white background, which isn't going to make it look like it's part of this picture. I'm going to cut out my objects. And again, I'm not super worried about the background because I'm going to cut it off. So now that your objects are cut out, you're ready to start putting it together. First, you need to decide if you want to add some or draw some things in your background on the construction paper that you glued behind your room. And it really is a good idea to do that, depending on the color of your paper. One simple thing to do is to use like a white colored pencil or a crayon and just add some stars, kind of like space. It really adds to that surreal feeling and look. If you have the light blue paper, you have more options as far as what you color with. Markers would be a good option, and you could make sort of like a scene, make it outside. But whatever you make, you want to draw it before you glue your objects. If you feel that you don't want to put something on this paper, you need to consult with me first, and we'll decide together if that's the best choice. Otherwise, throw some simple stars in there or draw an image. You could even, add some planets with other colored pencils. Just a little bit of something back there, even just a pattern, polka dots or hearts or whatever, just gives it a little bit more interest. So now what I want to do is play out my images before I glue. Now, so my dog, I had sketched it to be right in the middle, And what I don't want to do is have it up here, and the reason is, in the photograph, the foot was cut off. That was just, the photo didn't, they didn't take a picture with the dog's foot here. So I want to make sure it goes down there so that we can just assume that the foot is behind the floor. I mean, I could also change my mind if I really wanted to, and he could be coming, you know, from this side. And this is why we didn't put glue on these edges, because I can tuck my images wherever I want. So for example, he could be like that, and it's okay that he goes off the paper a little bit. So I'm actually going to leave him there for right now. Well, I'll put him where I originally had him. We'll see how that goes. But I can change my mind as much as I want because I'm not gluing. I had this snake tail coming out of this window, and notice the way I cut it, I have a little bit sticking out, and that I really don't want. So I'm going to just trim that edge there so that when I have it there, you can't see the end coming off the other side, because if it's like that, it's cut off. It's not going to work. And then I have my cat peeking here. Now again, when we have something that's cut off, when the photo's cut off, you really don't want to just have it floating and cut off. So it should be coming from somewhere. And again, I want to slip it a little bit behind this edge here. But I could also try some other things out. For example, that. And then my dog actually still works too. And then, and here's where too, if you printed a lot of images, you might decide if you only want some of them or all of them. It's really up to you. So I am going to, maybe I decide I'm not really digging the snake tail. And so I'm going to have this rooster on the floor. I'm going to have my cat peeking out the side window here. And my dog, and again, I've got to watch that foot. Maybe he's hanging from the ceiling. And so I might move my rooster down a bit. So, you know, just play around with where your images go and watch out where, you know, I could have him tucked behind there too, but this is like he's coming into the room. So arrange them before you glue. And then, you know what, I do want my snake tail. I'm just going to make it shorter because I don't want it to run into the rooster. So I'll trim it even more because I just think that is it's very surreal having the snake tail come out. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm ready to glue. And gluing neatly is really important. A glue stick works great if you have one. Otherwise, just small dots of glue. And here's where too you can start deciding if you want to, and you probably should, add a little bit of glue to the edges. Just don't go crazy with the glue. You don't necessarily need to glue every single thing that sticks up. And if you're using liquid glue, or even the glue stick, you might need to hold some things down to let it dry a second. All right, we're almost there. Last step. If you have things that are on the floor, you need a shadow. Okay, it's going to really just make it look like the object is part of the picture. Now, my snake tail actually came with a shadow, but I'm going to add just some shading underneath. And you might need to wait until after your glue dries if it's super wet and sticky. You don't want to color over wet glue. And then for the rooster, you really just make kind of like a scribbly oval underneath the object. There. And now because